Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Governance Committee meeting of 17th of November 2020. Welcome to members of the press and public watching this meeting live. I'm Councillor Richard Barrett, Chair of the Governance Committee. This is a meeting being held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. The public and press can still hear and see the meeting, but public speaking has been suspended and any written questions submitted in advance that were deemed acceptable by the Council's monitoring officer will be read out as answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the Council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via a recorded vote taken by a Democratic Services team member on behalf of the Chair, whereby individual councillors will be asked at the end of the debate to state if they are for, against, or if they wish to abstain on the recommendation before them at that time. The exceptions to this are the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting or any other procedural item, or where the item's sole recommendation to a committee is to note the report. For those items, the Chair will move the item, seconded by the Vice Chair, and it will be presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any committee member is made. May I ask the Democratic Services officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves, giving their name and job title.
Ms Matthews, Democratic Services Officer.
Chris Pedlow, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you. Before I invite members of the committee to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent, their backgrounds are set to a generic office background, and that they are aware of their surroundings so that they are not disturbed during the meeting. This includes making sure all TVs, radios and smart speakers are switched off. Committee members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off unless speaking, and their cameras turned off unless they are requesting to speak. When asked to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves, and pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in connection. With this in mind, committee members are asked to be aware of who they will follow in the voting process and to prepare accordingly. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Have you received any apologies for absence?
We have not, Chair.
No. Okay, thank you very much. Items 2 and 3, disclosures of interest and minutes. We will now be taking committee member introductions together with items 2 and 3. Please may I ask committee members when called upon to confirm their name and the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest to make, and if they agree with the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Committee held on 6th of July 2020 as a correct record. Chris.
Can I call about Councillor Barrett?
Yes, thank you. Richard Barrett, Councillor for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood Ward. I don't have any declarations of interest to make, and I agree the minutes of the meeting of the 6th of July 2020 as a correct record.
Councillor Duncan Crowe.
Councillor Duncan Crowe, representing Furness Green. I have no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes of the previous meeting.
Councillor Carol Reid.
Councillor Carol Reid, Councillor for Furness Green Ward. I have no declarations to make and I agree the meetings of the last meeting.
Councillor Michael Jones.
Councillor Michael Jones, I have no declarations to make. I'm the member for Bewbush and Broadfield North, and I agree the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Peter Lamb.
Councillor Peter Lamb, I represent Northgate and West Green. I have nothing to declare and I agree the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Banzer.
Thank you. Councillor Bob Lanza, Pound Hill South and Worth Ward, no declarations of interest and I agree the minutes.
Councillor Allen.
Councillor Tim Runnan, Councillor for Broadfield Ward. I have no declaration of interest and I agree the minutes previously.
Councillor Malik.
Good evening, Councillor Malik from Langley Green and Tashmore Ward. And I have no declaration to make and I agree with the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Councillor McCarthy.
Good evening, Councillor Kevin McCarthy, Houndhill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest and I agree with the minutes from the last meeting. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Mullins.
Hello, I'm Councillor Mullins. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm not in a position to agree the minutes. But I've no interest to declare. I'm from Gossops Green and Broadfield North East.
Chair, for the purposes of records, there are two other officers involved in the meeting. There's the Chief Executive, Natalie Bromwell, and there's Elections Manager, Andrew Oakley.
Okay, thank you very much. As a result of that, the committee agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Committee held on 6th of July 2020 are an accurate record, and I will sign those as appropriate. That then takes us on to item 4, public question time. Have there been any written questions submitted that were accepted under the Constitution and subsequently published in a supplementary agenda?
There haven't, Chair, no.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us on to our first substantive item, item 5, polling arrangements May 2021. We will now move on to the consideration of the polling arrangements May 2021 report, which can be found at pages 7 to 11 of the agenda. And can I ask Andrew Oakley, our Electoral Services Manager, to please present his report to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. This report is asking the committee to consider creating a new polling district to resolve a problem that we've identified in the ward of Bewbush and Broadfield North. There's a small discrepancy between the ward boundary and the West Sussex boundary, and in order to deal with polling at the polling station in Bewbush, we need to separate out the residents of a small area in Burbage Close in Bewbush, so that we can issue them separate ballot papers, and that means creating a new polling district in the electoral register. So the committee is recommended to recommend to council the creation of a new polling district specifically for that road.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. The process for discussion on the report will be as follows. Any committee member wishing to speak should turn their camera on. This will signify to the Democratic Services Officer your request to speak. You will then be invited to speak one by one. When you are called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and check that your screen is surrounded by a red box before speaking, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Please turn your camera and microphone off when you have finished speaking and are no longer live. All committee members who have indicated will be called on to provide comments and ask questions in turn, with officers responding to any questions raised. The views expressed by the committee during the discussions and any action will be acknowledged and documented by the officers. If there are to be any alternative recommendations, then please propose these when providing comments. We will now begin consideration of the report. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. Well, I'm not seeing any cameras going on, so I'm assuming everybody's happy with this. Before we move on, I will just ask one question, just for clarification, to Andrew, regarding staffing on the day of elections in this particular ward. Given that we have, if you look at page 11, Appendix A, we have this very small polling district that we're creating with 44 electors, 5 of whom are postal voters. So there would be a maximum of 39 people voting in person. Can I just ask for clarification that that won't mean we'll have to have a separate table with a member of staff, therefore potentially 40 voters during a 15-hour period, and that we will be able to manage it some other way? Andrew.
Yes, Chair, I can confirm it has no extra staffing implications. The polling district will be dealt with one of the other polling stations in the Bewbush Centre.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification on that. Right, I will ask once again, if any committee member wishes to speak, please turn your camera on. If not, all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we will move on to the recommendation as set out in the report. We will be taking a recorded vote. Members of the committee will be called upon to vote in alphabetical order. Once you are live, please unmute your microphone, ensure your camera is on, and state whether you are for or against the recommendation, or if you abstain. The recommendation is that this committee recommends that full council amends the polling scheme to create polling district LAC as shown on the table at Appendix A to the report. I will move the recommendation. Please note that this moves the recommendation to the vote and does not necessarily indicate my support, nor that of the Vice Chair for the recommendation itself. Can I please ask the Vice Chair to second?
I formally second.
Thank you. Would the Democratic Services Officer please conduct the recorded vote?
Can I ask the Chair, Councillor Barrett, to his vote, please? You're muted. Councillor Barrett, you're muted.
Sorry, 4.
Councillor Crowe?
4.
Councillor Eade?
4.
Can I just, before we get to the next vote, I'm just making the point, one of our councillors appears to have a technical issue, Councillor Malik. I'm trying to dial him in and we'll continue the vote. Just for records' sake, Councillor Jones?
4.
Councillor Lamb? Okay, we'll go to Councillor Lanza.
4.
Councillor Lamb?
4.
Councillor Lunnan?
Same 4.
4.
Councillor Malik, are you there? It looks like you've dropped out, so we'll continue. We'll give him another chance in a minute. Councillor McCarthy?
4.
And Councillor Mullins?
4.
So, Chair, well, I'm just going to ask if Councillor Malik is there for a final time. Otherwise, he's not responding to the vote.
Okay.
Final time, Councillor Malik, are you present to vote? Therefore, Chair, I'm taking he's not there. It's a unanimous 9 members in favour, none against. So it's carried. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The recommendation as set out in the report has been approved, and that will now be a recommendation to full council. Item 6, May 2021 elections. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a verbal update on the 2021 May elections. Could I again ask Andrew Oakley, Electoral Services Manager, to please provide the update to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. We thought it would be useful to give the committee an update and answer any members' questions on the current state of planning for the elections for May 2021. Planning is well underway for these elections. The Electoral Commission has nationally given us guidance about how we should conduct elections given the current pandemic, and they will be regularly updating that guidance, which will influence our planning as we get closer to the elections. The government have been very clear, and indeed the Cabinet Office have recently issued notification that these elections will not be postponed. So they will take place in May 2021, and all of our planning is revolving around that. They're a complex combination of elections that we're facing. Of course, we have the postponed borough elections from May 2020, combined with elections to West Sussex County Council across the whole of West Sussex and the Sussex Police and Crime Commissioner. The combination of those all three elections being held at once is a very complex operation in itself, but making sure that the polls are COVID secure is going to be still more challenging. So at this early stage, we thought it would be useful to indicate to the committee what we were expecting to do next year, the reports that we'd be likely to be making, and what polling might look like on polling day. The Police and Crime Commissioner aspects of the election, of course, will be operated by the returning officer for the police area, being the whole of Sussex, and that is going to be the Brighton returning officer. So they will be responsible for those aspects of the poll across Sussex, and they will be wanting to maintain some kind of stabilised arrangements across the whole of West Sussex, so that the voting arrangements are going to look similar wherever you are. So at this current stage, the sorts of areas that we're looking at are what the polling station arrangements will be, how we intend to count the vote, how we will staff the election with the different types of staff we might need, what absent voting arrangements we need. So I thought I'd cover where we got to in that. The initial planning has been around polling stations, and I think what we can expect to see is something that voters might be quite familiar with in shops at the moment. So we'll be looking to have one-way systems, separate entrances and exits, floor markings to maintain social distancing within the building, space for queuing where queuing is necessary, and managing that, so staff available on hand to manage any queues. Also sanitising arrangements with PPE issued, so that would look like face shields and masks for staff, voters needing to wear masks, sanitising equipment in the polling booths, and potentially sanitising all of the equipment after each voter. So there's a lot of issues there, obviously, for us to consider, and we are doing that on a building by building basis. So members will, I'm sure, recall that we last reviewed polling districts and polling stations in 2019, following the boundary reviews that we had then, and we had a polling scheme that has operated now at 3 separate elections across 2019 and operated generally very satisfactorily. To make sure that these buildings are COVID compliant, we now need to go back and audit them and be able to generate the sorts of layouts that are going to ensure voters that they're safe when they vote. Now, it may well be that not all of the buildings that we have in our polling scheme can necessarily be operated in that way. So we've been looking to come back to the committee in January with proposals about the polling stations that we might need to use. We, in our current polling scheme, have 3 schools, and members may wish to consider whether, given disruption of education, they wish to continue the use of schools for this individual election. And that's something that we can cover in the report to the committee in January. I think the other key issue really that we're looking at right now is the sort of staffing that we're going to be able to have available. Having done an age profile of the staff that we use in polling stations at the moment, I think it could be fair to say that some of the most experienced staff will be unavailable in May, so we will be planning recruitment, but also we will be planning the staffing on the basis that there will be a limited number of people and a defined number of people in each polling station at any one time, which will need to be controlled. So it may well be that we need to have fewer staff in each polling station, which then would possibly mean to the leading to the combination of polling stations within buildings. So where there are 3, there might be 2 to allow for sufficient social distancing within what might be quite a small room. So those are the key issues that we're thinking about with polling stations. As far as the count's concerned, the detailed planning for that will take place in the new year. But at the moment, we know that the Police and Crime Commissioner count will take place on the Monday following the election, and the Borough count and West Sussex County Council count will take place on the Friday. During the day, the Borough count will be first, and the West Sussex County Council count will take place in the afternoon. The count itself will take place at the Sports Hall for K2, which of course is a very large hall and provides space for social distancing, but there's a lot of detail work that we need to do on how we will achieve that and practically manage the count at the same time. As far as absent voting is concerned, there will be a national and Sussex-wide push early in the new year for people to consider whether they want an absent vote in preference to voting in person. However, the national message and the Sussex message will very much be voting in polling stations will be safe. However, if you would like to arrange an absent vote, please do that early to arrange to ensure that we've got those arrangements in place. So I'll be very happy to take any questions if members have any questions, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew, for a very comprehensive update. We will now give committee members the opportunity to ask questions of the Electoral Services Manager. The process will be the same as before. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak. And I can see the first person whose camera is on is Councillor Mullins.
Thank you for that, Andrew. It's very clear, very helpful. I picked up about voters wearing masks, and then it just caused me to ask this question. Most people these days are getting in the habit of carrying a mask around with them, and that should be okay. But if somebody was to turn up to vote who didn't have a mask, will we have a stock of masks disposable, I presume, at each polling station to say, yes, you're still entitled to vote, but please wear this mask? Will we be able in that situation to give them a mask? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, Chair. If the national guidance is that voters must wear masks in polling stations, I think it will be essential for us to have disposable masks available. Otherwise, we will be in the position of turning away voters at a polling station.
Thank you. Next on the list is Michael Jones.
Thank you, Chair. My question, several questions actually. First, I'll start with a comment though. I do support the suggestion of not holding or not having any of the polling stations in schools for the May elections. I think it's absolutely right that the schools have been disrupted more than enough now. Now the children are back. It seems to me that this extra day at school is probably more important than it would have been in normal years. Just a suggestion, or just a question really. I did wonder, in terms of the order of borough and county election counting. Obviously, it'll be borough first and county afterwards. Is that the order it's going to happen in the councils across West Sussex, or we've reached here? And also, I'm a little bit curious. I mean, obviously, unless I misheard you, Andrew, through you, Chair, the PCC election count's going to be on the Monday, and I'm just wondering what the rationale is for waiting that length of time. It seems an unusually long time, the tradition of this country for counting elections. Thanks very much.
Chair, thank you. The choice of a Monday count was one made by the police area returning officer for Sussex at Brighton, and I believe it's for administrative reasons, so it's availability of buildings across Sussex. We would have been in the position to count either on Saturday or the Monday, but there had to be one count day, and the area returning officer has selected Monday as that date. And apologies, Chair, I've forgotten the first question. I wonder if you could remind me.
Yes, it was just we're counting the borough votes first, then the county afterwards. I was just wondering if that's going to be the case across the county that you're aware of.
Yes, apologies. It's not the case because not all areas have got borough elections. So those areas that don't have any borough elections will be moving straight on to the county count in the morning.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I move on to the next speaker, could I just say, just in response to something Councillor Jones said, I do think we need to be careful when we talk about the use of schools, because again, I would support us having a discussion about not causing schools to close on election day. But I do think we need to be very clear that we use 3 schools in Crawley as polling places, and 2 of those 3 schools don't actually close and don't need to close. One of those is the Mill Primary School in Ifield, which has operated for many years using a small annex at the front of the school, which can be completely separated from the rest, and it doesn't affect the children at all. And the other one is Forge Wood Primary School in my own ward, which is only being used as a polling station on a temporary basis until the community centre in Forge Wood is built. It's always been the intention that the community centre will become the polling station. And again, the Forge Wood Primary School are very happy, as I understand it, to have polling there because they can separate out an area that doesn't affect the children and doesn't cause the school to close. I know the third school in Maidenbower is a different issue and they do have to close. And clearly that's a dialogue we'll need to have. But I do think we need to be clear that 2 of those 3 schools actually would not be required to close, and subject to them being happy to continue with the arrangement, then I would support keeping the polling there because they can still operate in the same way. I've got Councillor Crowe now.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for making those points. I was going to do exactly the same. It is just one school that is an issue, which is the one in Maidenbower. Excuse me. Councillor Jones mentioned the Police and Crime Commission account being on the Monday, and questioned if you like, the delay from polling day being 3 days, but of course it's now 2 weeks since the US election and they're still counting that one, aren't they? So I'm glad that we are a bit more prompt than what they are in the US. I did have question around the count, and I wondered whether it would be Andrew would be intending to limit the number of attendees from the political parties, the counting agents. Is there any plan to change the number that we normally have? There tends to be sort of a formula that's used that tends to be a candidate, guest of the candidate, and then 2 counting agents per candidate. But I'm just mindful that while the staff may be very well organised in their social distancing, it might, there is a risk it's perhaps not going to be quite as simple for those who are observing the count. Indeed, I've noticed on occasion there could even be a little bit of pushing and shoving to try and get a good view from some people. So I'd be keen that we perhaps would have some sort of allocated spaces for individual members. And I suppose there are some husband and wife teams, so they could be next to each other, but individual spaces for so that counting agents are also spaced out. And in a similar vein, is there any plan to change what normally happens at some polling stations where political parties can send tellers to those stations to ask the numbers of the voters their polling number on the way out?
Yes, as far as tellers is concerned, we're keen to get guidance from the Electoral Commission nationally on this. Clearly, some buildings will be better able to accommodate tellers than others, I think, and that's something that we'll need to establish in our audit of buildings, and then have conversations with agents as we get closer to the election about what may be appropriate at what places and what provisions maybe we can put in place, perhaps to help. I don't have a hard and fast answer there yet, but I think that's one of the elements that really needs to have a national guidance, and I think perhaps the political parties also will want to look at their own national guidance as well. And I'm sure there will be some. As far as the count is concerned, yes, I think those are all suggestions that we'd be keen to investigate. The general principle is that there should be places for counting agents across the range of candidates able to cover the number of counters counting votes, so that candidates should be able to assure themselves of, across the range of candidates, should be able to assure themselves that the count is being conducted accurately, and that's an important principle, and it's one that we'll be seeking to maintain at this election despite the restrictions. So we'll be looking for ideas such as those Councillor Crowe's given, for floor markings and so on. But how we might enforce the social distancing might be another matter. these are difficult issues, I think.
Can I just come back, Chairman? Thank Mr. Oakley for his response. And I do wonder whether there might be a case for a reduction in the number of counting agents, given the uniqueness of this pandemic. But of course, we have, I'm just thinking on the Friday count, of course, we've got two separate counts, haven't we? So we have a separate count for the borough council in the morning and a separate count for the county council in the afternoon. But of course, the verification for both will have to be done. Actually, I think all three verifications will have to be done, won't they? And in fact, if anything, that's going to take a lot of the time, isn't it? I think in the morning. So actually thinking about it, the county council count will probably be shorter than the borough council count because the verification shouldn't be needed. But I presume we'd probably have separate attendees lists for both specific counts if they're going to be labelled separately. But yes, I think a view needs to be taken at some point a bit near the time as to the whether we'd have the normal number of counting agents or whether we'd seek to reduce it slightly to enable social distancing to be better.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking to see, I can't see anyone else indicating. If not, really, if I can just sum up by again thanking Andrew for a very interesting and useful presentation, and also for all the work that he and other officers are doing to try to make sure that the elections and the count run smoothly and safely next year. I mean, it would be nice to say, actually, hopefully a lot of this won't be necessary, because we don't know where we're going to be in 6 months' time, and we may find, you know, with some of the recent news about vaccines, that actually some of the restrictions are relaxed, and we may be able to operate more as more normally than we're currently expecting. But of course, we don't know that, and we've got to make provision to do everything very securely and very safely. And obviously, if that isn't necessary, then that will be a bonus. So, you know, thank you again for all that work. But I would also say that I know Andrew talked about possibly coming back in January if there were proposals to change some polling places. I have made a suggestion that actually, as we have 2 meetings of this committee left during this municipal year, January and March, that we actually have this as a standing item on the agenda, so that Andrew can report back to us on where we are with preparations for the elections, because obviously it's going to be a movable feast and there will be a number of changes. So I think it would be useful, if you're happy to do that, for to have that on the agenda, and so that members can be kept updated. Okay, right, if there are no other comments, all committee members have had the opportunity to speak. I move that the committee note the update, and I ask that the Vice Chair second this.
I second it.
Thank you. And then can I ask other members to please indicate now, if you're not in agreement with that recommendation, please indicate by turning your camera on. No? Okay, that update has been noted. That then takes us on to item 7, supplemental agenda. There is no supplementary agenda. Therefore, with the business of the committee concluded, the meeting is now closed at 7:39 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you, Richard.